if I haven't said anything that causes somebody to want to ask a question, I've really been a failure.
Dr. Friedman, how do we persuade those who are recipients of these vast numbers of computerized checks from the federal government that their interests also are in danger?
Well, let's ask ourselves first, who are the recipients? Because the recipients are you and me, and not merely people you may think of. The great fear of people who feared public democracy was that the have-nots would get together against the haves. In my opinion, that fear has been a false one. The problem is not that the bottom 51% get together against the top 49. The reason for that is that those people who tend to be not successful in the economic sphere are also not very good in the political sphere. What we have is that the coalition that forms is a middle. You eliminate the 10% at the top because their votes are less important than the money you can get from them by taxation. And you eliminate, if I say 10% at the top, then I eliminate 39% at the bottom. And it's that middle group of 51% that forms the effective political coalition. So almost every governmental measure undertaken in the name of helping the poor turns out to confer benefits on middle-income people. So let's for a moment be careful about who are the recipients. How do we persuade them? I don't think we have too much of a trouble persuading most of them. I think most of us believe we're not getting our money's worth. When you start out and you tax 90% of the people to help 10% of the people, it's easy. But when 100% of the people are taking it out from one pocket in order to put it in the other pocket, it ought to be fairly easy to persuade people that that's an arrangement under which you lose rather than gain. So I don't believe that frankly, I really don't believe your problem is the basic problem. I think the basic problem is a much more basic philosophical problem. Would you mind coming to this microphone? That's the one they have linked. Would you mind coming to this microphone? That's right. Let's get as they say in industry, a backlog of orders there.
Dr. Friedman, do you believe in a total laissez-faire libertarian economy?
Yes. I also believe there's room for government, and those are not a contradiction. I believe that government has some very important functions to perform. It has the function of protecting individuals from physical coercion by their fellows. It has the function of protecting the nation from foreign enemies. It has the function of enabling us to have a forum, a means through which we can decide on the rules of property and so on by which we want to conduct our affairs. And it has the function of adjudicating disputes among us. Those functions, in my opinion, are the fundamental and basic functions of government. There may be some other peripheral things that government can do without doing much harm. But beyond that, I believe in as unfettered a free enterprise economy as is feasible within those very narrow limits for a limited government.
Professor Friedman, there is a great deal of uncertainty in the business community over the economic policies of the Carter administration. Inflation is also considered the number one problem, the number one concern of the American people, according to public opinion surveys. It seems obvious by looking at the economic numbers that both inflation and interest rates are on the rise. What then do you see for the future economy and the extent of our current recovery? Do you see a possible recession in the year ahead?
Well, we've been having recessions for some 200 years. I think it would be a very bold man who would say he doesn't see a future recession. Of course there's going to be a future recession. The only question is when. That's the $64 question. So far as the economic policy of the Carter administration is concerned, it's not entirely clear what the economic policy is. What is clear is what the social policy is, what the political policy is. The policy of the Carter administration is a policy of continuing and extending governmental controls. Of course, Government policy is to make it more efficient and cheaper. We all want to do things as cheaply as we can. But I am not judging from statements. As you and I know, statements are not good predictors of behavior. You have to look at behavior. The major initiative of the Carter period has been the energy program. The energy program, in my opinion, can be explained in one way and one way only. That it is a program which has as its bottom line governmental control of the production, consumption, and distribution and consumption of energy. From that point of view, I believe those who think that the energy program are in trouble because Congress has been wrangling over it are wrong. The major objective of the Carter energy program has been achieved. It was achieved by the establishment of a Department of Energy with an annual budget of $10 billion, roughly equal to the total profits of all the oil companies in this country. It was achieved by the establishment of a Department of Energy which has 19,000 employees. You now have established a very strong pressure group to promote further government intervention in the control of the energy industry. It is now set on the route which has been followed over a longer period, but after all, we learn how to go faster, which has been followed over a longer period by the railroad industry. It's on the route to complete nationalization and control. I take that to be the most obvious indication, the clearest indication of what is the fundamental policy of this administration. They are not different in this from earlier administrations. This is not a partisan statement. Unfortunately, I mentioned earlier that one of the major moves toward collectivism was made by President Nixon when he introduced price and wage control. Few people realize that our present energy problems date very largely to that measure. The only price that was fixed by the Nixon price and wage control, the only price that was not relieved from ceilings was the oil price. Its origin was August 15th, 1971, and without that price and wage control, you very probably would not be having an energy crisis in this country or a Department of Energy. Now, if you go beyond that and look at it in the more sort of day-to-day affairs, what I note is that the Carter budget proposes to continue increasing government spending as a fraction of income. President Carter talks about reducing taxes. Neither he nor anyone else has proposed to reduce taxes in any economic, meaningful sense. Neither the Republicans nor the Democrats at the moment are proposing to reduce taxes. The true tax that the American people pay is what government spends. If the federal government spends $61 billion more than it takes in, who do you suppose pays the difference? I don't think that the Arab sheiks are willing to pay it. Who does pay it? You pay it. I pay it. We pay it as taxpayers. The only thing is, instead of calling that a tax, we pay it in the form of a hidden tax called inflation, or in an even more deeply hidden tax called government borrowing. But both of those are forms of taxation. So nobody has proposed to reduce taxes. What they have proposed is to shift the form of taxation, to rely somewhat less on such direct taxes as income taxes, and somewhat more on such indirect taxes as inflation and borrowing. The first thing you have to keep your eye on is do not look primarily at the deficit. Look at government spending. That's the measure of the size of government and of the true size of government taxes.